The great hall of the Galactic Council stood silent as Ambassador Veltar walked to the center platform. His blue skin had turned pale with fear, and his 6 arms trembled as he held the datapad, containing the latest reports from his home systems. Around him sat representatives from dozens of alien species, each one more advanced and peaceful than the last. The Xanthari with their crystal bodies that could deflect any weapon, the Malvirans who controlled trade across half the galaxy, and the Ethereals whose minds could bend reality itself. All of them watched as Veltar prepared to speak words that would change everything. "Honored council members," Veltar began, his voice cracking with emotion. "The Catherian Republic faces complete extinction. The Voidborn Collective has consumed 17 of our colonies in the past 6 months. Our military forces have been destroyed. Our people are dying by the billions." A low murmur ran through the assembled aliens. The Voidborn were known to all of them, a nightmare species that appeared from the dark spaces between stars. They consumed everything living, turning entire worlds into feeding grounds for their endless hunger. Most species had been lucky enough to avoid them so far. The head of the Xanthari delegation, a being that looked like living glass, spoke first. "The Xanthari Protectorate sympathizes with your plight, but our defensive technologies are not suited for offensive operations. We can shield our own worlds but cannot project force across galactic distances." The Malviran representative, a creature that resembled a giant blue octopus, nodded agreement. "The Trade Federation lacks military vessels. Our resources are committed to maintaining commercial routes. Perhaps economic sanctions against the Voidborn would be more appropriate." Several other delegates murmured their agreement. The Gernaki cited their peaceful nature. The Stellari mentioned their lack of warships. One by one, each species found reasons why they could not help the dying Catherians. Veltar felt his hope fading. These were the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, yet none would lift a finger to help his people. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "We are not asking you to sacrifice yourselves. We only need enough military support to evacuate our remaining colonies. 30 billion Catherians will die if we receive no assistance." The chamber fell silent again. The weight of those numbers hung in the air like a physical presence. 30 billion lives was more than the total population of some species. Finally, Counselor Zafara of the Ethereal Collective spoke. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, a side effect of her species' telepathic abilities. "There is one option we have not discussed. The humans recently joined our alliance. Their application included military assessments that were quite remarkable." A ripple of discomfort passed through the chamber. The humans were new to galactic society, having only made contact 3 years ago. Most species viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "The human homeworld is classified as a Class 12 death world," Zafara continued. "This represents the highest danger rating our scientists have ever recorded. The planet experiences regular natural disasters, extreme weather patterns, and is populated by millions of predatory species. Most of our xenobiologists consider it barely habitable." The Xanthari delegate made a sound like breaking glass. "Class 12? Our homeworld rates a Class 2 on the habitability scale. How did any species evolve intelligence under such conditions?" "That is precisely why they might be able to help," Zafara replied. "The humans have submitted preliminary military doctrines that are unlike anything in our databases. They appear to have developed warfare into a precise science." Ambassador Veltar grasped at this slim hope. "Where can I find these humans? If there is any chance they can help my people, I must speak with them immediately." Zafara projected a star chart into the center of the chamber. A small yellow star appeared, surrounded by several planets. The Sol system, located in the outer spiral arm. The humans have established a small embassy station near their homeworld, but most of their military vessels patrol the edges of their territory. "Their territory?" the Malviran asked. "But they have only one habitable world. The humans consider their entire star system to be sovereign territory," Zafara explained. "They have military vessels stationed around every planet, moon, and asteroid. Their defensive posture is quite aggressive by our standards. Veltar studied the star chart. The human system was 3 days' travel from Council space using the fastest available ships. I will depart immediately. Can you provide an introduction? Already. Done, Safara replied. I have transmitted your situation to the human embassy. They have agreed to a meeting, though they request it take place aboard one of their military vessels rather than at a neutral location. The other delegates exchanged worried glances. Most species conducted diplomacy in carefully controlled environments designed to minimize any potential for conflict. Meeting aboard a warship seemed almost primitive. Very well, Veltar said. I accept their terms. 3 days later, Veltar's diplomatic vessel approached the coordinates the humans had provided. What he found there challenged everything he thought he knew about space travel. The human ship was massive, easily twice the size of any vessel the Catherians had ever built. Its hull was dark metal covered in angular projections that could only be weapon systems. Catherian vessel, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the UNS Intrepid. Came a transmission in heavily accented galactic standard. You are cleared to dock at Bay 7. Please follow the guidance beacons and maintain minimum speed. As Veltar's ship entered the docking bay, he was struck by the sheer scale of the human vessel. The bay alone was large enough to hold a dozen ships his size. Robotic systems guided his craft to a landing platform with mechanical precision. Captain Morrison met him at the airlock. The human was tall by galactic standards, with short brown hair and pale skin marked by what Veltar's briefing materials had identified as scars, permanent marks left by injuries. Most species use medical technology to prevent such blemishes, but humans apparently wore them as badges of honor. Ambassador Veltar, Morrison said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. Welcome aboard. I've reviewed your situation reports. The Voidborn are bad news. Veltar clasped the human's hand, surprised by the strength of his grip. Captain Morrison, my people are desperate. We have exhausted all other options. The Council species cannot provide military assistance, Morrison nodded grimly. Yeah, I read the transcripts of your Council meeting. No offense to your allies, but they think like prey animals. When faced with a predator, they hide or run. Humans think differently. They walked through corridors lined with armed soldiers and weapons lockers. Everything about the ship spoke of a species prepared for war at any moment. What do you mean? Veltar asked. We evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us, Morrison explained. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, even the weather. The only way to survive was to become the most dangerous thing on the planet. When we encounter a threat, our first instinct isn't to run or hide. It's to eliminate the threat completely. They entered a command center filled with display screens showing tactical information. Human officers moved between stations with quiet efficiency, monitoring what appeared to be an enormous amount of military data. This is just one patrol ship, Morrison said, noticing Veltar's amazement. Earth maintains 3 full combat fleets in addition to our defensive forces. When your people asked for help, High Command took the request very seriously. Veltar felt a surge of hope for the first time in months. You will help us? Morrison smiled, but there was something predatory in the expression. Ambassador, we're not just going to help you. We're going to solve your Voidborn problem permanently. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the underground war room beneath Geneva, watching holographic displays that showed the crisis unfolding in Catherian space. The room buzzed with activity as intelligence officers updated threat assessments and fleet commanders reviewed deployment options. Secretary of Defense Paul Carter stood beside her, his face grim as he studied the latest reports from the front lines. The situation is worse than we initially thought, Dr. Lisa Martinez said as she entered the room carrying a data tablet. As the military's chief xenobiologist, she had spent the past week analyzing every piece of information about the Voidborn Collective. These aren't just raiders or conquerors. They're a complete extinction event. Fleet Commander Ryan Brooks pulled up a 3-dimensional map of the affected sectors. Red markers showed systems that had gone dark, their populations consumed and their worlds stripped bare. 17 Catherian colonies in 6 months? That's almost 3 billion dead? At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds within a year. Admiral Sullivan studied the data with the cold calculation that had made her Earth's youngest fleet admiral. She had commanded ships in the Mars Rebellion and the asteroid mining wars, conflicts that had taught humanity the price of hesitation when facing existential threats. What about the other council species? Why aren't they mobilizing their forces? Because they don't have forces, Brooks replied bluntly. The Zentauri have impressive defensive technology but no offensive capabilities. Their entire military doctrine is based on protecting their own worlds. The Malvirans are merchants who hire private security for their trade routes. The Ethereals are pacifists who solved their last war 3,000 years ago through meditation. Secretary Carter shook his head in disbelief. How did these species survive long enough to build interstellar civilizations? The universe is full of threats. Dr. Martinez brought up images of various alien homeworlds. They evolved on what we call garden worlds. Stable climates, abundant resources, few natural predators. Most of them never faced the kind of environmental pressures that drove human evolution. War is literally incomprehensible to some of these species. But not to us, Admiral Sullivan said quietly. She had grown up on Mars Colony 7, where equipment failure meant death, and every day was a struggle against a hostile environment. Earth might be humanity's birth world, but every human settlement had been carved from places that wanted to kill them. How many ships can we deploy without leaving Earth defenseless? Brooks activated the fleet status board. Green indicators showed ship readiness across the solar system. The 3rd, 7th, and 11th fleets are at full combat status. That gives us 300 vessels, including heavy cruisers, destroyers, and support ships. The flagships UN's Defiance, UN's Vengeance, and UNS Retribution are all available for deployment. Admiral Sullivan noted the ship names with satisfaction. Unlike the alien species who name their vessels after flowers or philosophical concepts, humans chose names that sent clear messages about their intentions. What about crew readiness? Every ship is staffed with veterans from the Mars conflict or the Belt Wars, Brooks replied. These aren't peacekeepers or explorers. They're soldiers who understand what real warfare looks like. Dr. Martinez raised a concern that had been bothering her since reviewing the council transcripts. The alien species might not understand our military doctrine. Human warfare evolved from a hostile environment where the only options were victory or extinction. We don't fight to win territory or achieve political goals. We fight to completely eliminate threats. Secretary Carter nodded grimly. The Voidborn chose the wrong species to threaten. They might have adapted to fighting civilized aliens, but they've never faced Deathworlders. Admiral Sullivan made her decision. Deploy all 3 fleets immediately. Full combat loadouts with maximum ordnance. Brooks, I want every ship carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet if necessary. What about rules of engagement? Brooks asked. The Voidborn are an extinction-level threat, Sullivan replied. There are no rules except complete destruction of enemy forces. No prisoners, no negotiation, no mercy. This is total war. The orders went out across the solar system within hours. On Mars, the massive shipyards that had built humanity's war machine roared to life, loading vessels with weapons that other species had never imagined. The UN's Defiance took on Nova torpedoes designed to destroy stars. The UN's Vengeance loaded kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planets. The UN's Retribution filled its holds with exotic matter warheads that violated several galactic treaties. Captain Danny Walsh stood on the bridge of the UNS Hammer as his ship prepared for departure. His crew was typical of human military personnel, men and women who had grown up in environments where weakness meant death. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, had lost her parents in a mining accident on Europa. His navigator, Ensign Rick Turner, was a veteran of the Titan Rebellion where entire colonies had been wiped out by equipment failures. Final systems check complete. Foster reported. All weapon systems are green. Munitions bay is fully loaded, with kinetic penetrators, plasma charges, and antimatter warheads. Walsh nodded approvingly. The Hammer was a destroyer designed for one purpose: killing enemy ships as efficiently as possible. Unlike alien vessels with their elegant curves and artistic designs, human warships looked exactly like what they were: instruments of destruction. Navigation, plot a course for the Catherian border, Walsh ordered. Maximum speed. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out as 300 human warships prepared for deployment. Unlike the careful, ceremonial departures favored by other species, the human fleet simply vanished into hyperspace with ruthless efficiency. The journey to Catherian space took 4 days. During that time, human intelligence officers analyzed every piece of data about the Voidborn. Unlike alien military planners who focused on diplomatic solutions, the humans studied their enemies' weaknesses with the single-minded intensity of apex predators. The Voidborn rely on biological adaptation, reported Major Steve Collins, the fleet's intelligence chief. They absorb damage and evolve countermeasures. Most alien weapons fire slowly enough to give them time to adapt. Admiral Sullivan smiled coldly. Then we won't give them time. Overwhelming firepower delivered faster than they can process. Classic human doctrine. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Catherian territory to find representatives from the Galactic Council waiting for them. The aliens had expected a modest response, perhaps a few ships and some technical advisors. What they saw instead made them question everything they thought they knew about warfare. 300 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their angular hulls bristling with weapon systems the Council had never seen before. The N's Defiance alone was larger than most alien flagships, and it was just one of dozens of heavy cruisers in the human fleet. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the United Nations Space Force," came the transmission. "We're here to eliminate the Voidborn threat. All Council ships are to maintain minimum safe distance." Ambassador Veltar, watching from his observation vessel, felt a mixture of hope and terror. The human fleet looked like something from a nightmare. Ships designed by a species that had turned warfare into an art form. But they were here too. Help his people, and that was all that mattered. "Admiral Sullivan," Veltar transmitted to the flagship, "we are grateful for your assistance. Perhaps we should coordinate our approach with the remaining Catherian defense forces." "Negative," Sullivan interrupted. "Your people have suffered enough casualties. We'll handle this from here." The human fleet began moving deeper into Catherian space, leaving the alien observers behind. Unlike other species who approached warfare as a regrettable necessity, humans had embraced it as a science to be perfected. The Voidborn had consumed billions of innocent lives, and now they would learn what happened when you threatened a species that had clawed its way to the stars from the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The human fleet moved through Catherian space like a storm front, their sensors sweeping ahead for any sign of Voidborn activity. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, watching tactical displays that showed the devastation left behind by the alien invaders. 3 systems had been completely stripped of life, their planets reduced to barren rocks floating in space. Captain Danny Walsh received the first contact report while his destroyer squadron patrolled the outer edges of the Cowler system. His sensor operator, Petty Officer Jim Hayes, called out from his station with barely controlled excitement. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV. Multiple biological signatures, definitely Voidborn configuration." Walsh moved to the tactical display and studied the readings. 12 alien vessels were approaching from the direction of the dead Cowler colonies, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Unlike human ships with their clean geometric lines, the Voidborn craft looked like massive sea creatures. "Swimming through space, range to target?" Walsh asked. 400,000 kilometers in closing, Hayes replied. "They're accelerating toward us at approximately 15% of light speed." Lieutenant Amy Foster checked her weapons board. "All systems are green, Captain. Kinetic batteries are loaded and ready to fire. Plasma cannons are charged to full capacity. Walsh nodded grimly. This would be humanity's first real test against the species that had terrorized the galaxy. Signal the fleet. We have contact with hostile forces. All ships are to observe and record for tactical analysis. The Voidborn ships moved with fluid grace, their living hulls shifting and adapting as they approached the human formation. Intelligence reports suggested they could regenerate damage and evolve countermeasures against enemy weapons in real time. Most alien fleets had been overwhelmed by this adaptive capability. They're trying to communicate, reported Communications Officer Ensign Carol Reed. Standard galactic frequencies. The message appears to be a demand for surrender, Walsh almost smiled. No response. Let them come closer. The Voidborn vessels spread into an attack formation, preparing to envelop the human ships in the same tactics they had used against dozens of other species. Their bioweapons began charging, organic cannons that fired living projectiles designed to burrow into enemy hulls and consume them from within. Weapons range in 30 seconds. Foster announced. Walsh watched the tactical display with the calm patience of a predator. Human military doctrine emphasized striking first and striking hard, but it also stressed the importance of gathering intelligence. These Voidborn ships were about to provide valuable data about enemy capabilities. Open fire, he ordered. The UNS Hammer unleashed its full arsenal in a coordinated barrage that would have crippled any conventional warship. Kinetic penetrators traveling at significant fractions of light speed hammered into the lead Voidborn vessel. Plasma cannons fired. Superheated matter that could melt through meters of armor plating. Antimatter warheads detonated against the alien hulls with the force of small stars. The results exceeded even human expectations. The first Voidborn ship simply disintegrated under the overwhelming firepower, its biological structure unable to adapt quickly enough to survive. The second vessel began regenerating damage but was hit by a second wave of kinetic rounds before its defenses could adjust. Target destroyed, Foster reported with satisfaction. Moving to secondary targets. The remaining Voidborn ships attempted to adapt their tactics, spreading out to avoid concentrated fire and beginning their own attack runs. Their bioweapons launched clouds of living projectiles that twisted through space toward the human vessels. But the humans had prepared for this. Point defense systems that had been designed to handle asteroid swarms during the Belt Wars opened fire with mechanical precision. Thousands of small-caliber rounds created walls of metal that shredded the incoming bioweapons before they could reach their targets. Lieutenant Commander Ben Rodriguez, commanding the destroyer-on's Lightning, watched his tactical display with growing amazement. These things adapt to damage, but they can't adapt to being completely destroyed. Our weapons are hitting too hard and too fast for their regeneration systems to cope. The battle was over in less than 10 minutes. 12 Voidborn vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of organic debris. Not a single human ship had suffered significant damage. Admiral Sullivan received the combat reports aboard the UN's Defiance with grim satisfaction. The engagement had provided crucial intelligence about Voidborn capabilities and limitations. Signal all ships, she ordered. Begin tactical analysis of enemy wreckage. I want to know everything about how these things work. Dr. Lisa Martinez, monitoring the battle from the fleet's mobile laboratory ship, was already studying the biological samples collected from the destroyed vessels. The Voidborn are more advanced than we initially thought, she reported over the fleet communications network. Their ships are essentially living organisms with the ability to evolve in real time, but they have limitations. Explain, Sullivan requested. They can adapt to gradual damage or single weapon types, Martinez continued. But overwhelming force applied faster than their biological systems can process results in complete system failure. It's like trying to evolve resistance to a nuclear explosion. There simply isn't enough time. Captain Chris Bennett of the heavy cruiser UN's Thunder had been monitoring the analysis from his position with the main battle group. So we hit them harder than they can adapt to, classic human approach to problem solving. The news of the engagement spread quickly through both Human and alien communication networks. The Galactic Council representatives who had been following the human fleet at a safe distance were stunned by the results. No species in recorded history had achieved such a victory against the Voidborn. Ambassador Veltar contacted Admiral Sullivan directly. Admiral, we have monitored your engagement with the Voidborn scouts. Your success is beyond anything we had hoped for. Perhaps now we can negotiate with the main Voidborn fleet from a position of strength. Sullivan's response was immediate and uncompromising. Ambassador, there will be no negotiation. The Voidborn have killed billions of innocent people. They represent an existential threat to all life in this galaxy. Our mission is their complete elimination. But surely some form of peaceful resolution, Veltar began. No, Sullivan interrupted. Your species and the rest of the Council think like prey animals. When faced with a predator, you try to hide or appease it. Humans think like predators. When we encounter a threat to our pack, we eliminate it completely. Meanwhile, deeper in Voidborn territory, the hive mind that controlled the alien collective was experiencing something it had never felt before: confusion. The destruction of the scout force had been so complete and so sudden that very little useful data had been transmitted back to the main fleet. The hive mind had conquered 47 species across 3 galactic sectors. It had learned to adapt to every form of resistance, from the energy shields of the Zentari to the quantum weapons of the long-dead Vaxxer Empire. But this new species fought differently. Most civilizations tried to minimize casualties and preserve their ships. They fired precisely and retreated when faced with superior numbers. These humans seemed to approach warfare with the single-minded intensity of a virus, complete destruction of the enemy regardless of cost. The main Voidborn fleet, numbering over 2,000 bioships, began accelerating toward the human positions. The hive mind was confident that sheer numbers would overwhelm these newcomers. No species could stand against the full might of the collective. Admiral Sullivan watched the approaching enemy fleet on her strategic display. 2,000 ships was an impressive force by galactic standards. Against any other species, it would represent unstoppable power. All ships, prepare for a fleet engagement, she ordered across the tactical network. We are about to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a species that evolved on a death world. The Voidborn wanted a war. Now they're going to get one. The human fleet formed into battle formation and moved to meet the enemy. 300 ships against 2,000 seemed like impossible odds. But the humans had not come to fight a fair battle. They had come to demonstrate why their species had survived and thrived on the most dangerous planet known to galactic civilization. The hive mind felt something it had never experienced in its 1,000-year existence as it processed the scattered data fragments from the destroyed scout fleet. Fear was an alien concept to a species that had conquered everything it encountered. But the complete destruction of 12 vessels without any meaningful resistance created something close to that. In motion in its collective consciousness, the main Voidborn fleet stretched across space like a living constellation. Over 2,000 bioships moving in perfect coordination toward the human positions. Each vessel was a masterpiece of biological engineering, capable of healing damage, adapting to enemy weapons, and growing stronger through combat experience. The largest ships were kilometers long, their hulls pulsing with organs that served as both weapons and vital systems. Admiral Sullivan watched the approaching enemy fleet from the bridge of the UNS Defiance. The tactical display showed a vast cloud of red contacts moving steadily toward her formation. By any conventional measure, the odds were hopeless. 300 human ships against 2,000 Voidborn vessels should have been a massacre. Fleet status report, she ordered. Fleet Commander Ryan Brooks consulted his displays. All ships report ready for combat. Weapon systems are fully charged, munitions are loaded to capacity. The 7th Fleet is positioned to provide flanking fire, while the 11th Fleet maintains reserve position. Captain Danny Walsh aboard the Un's Hammer studied the enemy formation through his ship's sensors. The Voidborn moved like a school of predatory fish. their bioships weaving through space in patterns that would have been beautiful if they were not so deadly. His weapons officer, Amy Foster, was running final checks on their arsenal. Kinetic. Batteries loaded with armor-piercing rounds, Foster reported. Plasma cannons are charged to maximum output. Antimatter torpedoes are armed and ready for launch. Walsh nodded grimly. The destroyer's magazines were packed with enough firepower to level a small moon. Human military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force as the solution to most tactical problems. Signal the fleet. All vessels report ready for engagement. The Voidborn fleet began its attack run with confidence born from 1,000 victories. The hive mind had analyzed every species it had encountered, learning their weaknesses and adapting its tactics accordingly. Most civilizations fought defensively, trying to minimize losses while searching for diplomatic solutions. The few aggressive species had relied on single weapon types that could be adapted to over time. Enemy fleet entering maximum weapons range, reported the sensor operator aboard the UNS Defiance. They're spreading into an envelopment formation. Admiral Sullivan smiled coldly. The Voidborn were using the same tactics that had destroyed dozens of other fleets. Surround the enemy, overwhelm them with superior numbers, and adapt to their weapons until victory was achieved. It was a strategy that had never failed them. All ships implement Phoenix Protocol, Sullivan ordered across the fleet communication network. Phoenix Protocol was humanity's answer to adaptive enemies. Instead of trying to outlast or outmaneuver them, simply apply so much firepower that adaptation became impossible. Every ship in the fleet would fire everything they had in coordinated waves, each wave using different weapon types to prevent the enemy from developing effective countermeasures. The human fleet opened fire at maximum range with a barrage that lit up space like a new star. Kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed hammered into the lead Voidborn vessels. The organic hulls began adapting immediately, growing thicker armor and developing energy-absorbing layers to reduce damage, but the humans had planned for this. Before the Voidborn could complete their adaptations, the second wave arrived. Plasma cannons fired streams of superheated matter that melted through the newly formed armor. The bioships tried to adapt again, developing heat-resistant materials and cooling systems. The third wave was antimatter warheads that annihilated everything they touched. The fourth wave was exotic matter weapons that violated the laws of physics the Voidborn understood. The fifth wave was gravitational distortion devices that crushed ships from the inside out. Captain Chris Bennett commanded the heavy cruiser and thunder as it unleashed its full arsenal into the enemy formation. His ship alone carried enough weapons to outfit an entire alien fleet. Target the large bioships first, he ordered his gunners. Those look like command vessels. The results were devastating. Voidborn ships that had survived battles against entire fleets were torn apart by weapons they could not adapt to fast enough. Their biological systems, designed to evolve countermeasures over time, were overwhelmed by the sheer variety and intensity of human firepower. Commander Nick Parker led the destroyer squadron into the heart of the enemy formation, his ships firing continuously as they carved through the Voidborn ranks. These things are trying to adapt to everything at once, he reported over the tactical network. Their biological systems are overloading, the observation was correct. Voidborn vessels were literally tearing themselves apart as their adaptive mechanisms tried to respond to contradictory threats. Ships that developed armor against kinetic weapons became vulnerable to energy attacks. Vessels that adapted to energy weapons were destroyed by kinetic projectiles. The biological systems that had been their greatest strength became their fatal weakness. The hive mind experienced something beyond fear as it watched its fleet being systematically destroyed. For the first time in its existence, it considered the possibility of defeat. These humans fought like nothing it had ever encountered. They showed no interest in preserving their own forces or minimizing casualties. They simply applied overwhelming violence until their enemies ceased to exist. Lieutenant Amy Foster watched her targeting display with professional satisfaction as another Voidborn ship disintegrated under concentrated fire. That's our 5th tenth. Confirmed kill, she reported to Captain Walsh. Enemy formation is beginning to break apart. The Voidborn fleet, so confident at the start of the engagement, was falling apart under the relentless human assault. Ships that tried to retreat were hunted down by human destroyers. Vessels that attempted to regroup were scattered by cruiser fire. The organic coordination that had made them so effective against other species became a liability as panic spread through their ranks. Dr. Lisa Martinez monitored the battle from the fleet's scientific vessel, recording data that would revolutionize galactic understanding of warfare. The Voidborn biological systems have a maximum adaptation rate, she reported to Admiral Sullivan. If you exceed that rate with multiple weapon types, they suffer cascade failures throughout their organic infrastructure. Within 3 hours, the battle was over. 2,000 Voidborn ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of organic debris. The human fleet had suffered minor damage to a dozen vessels and no casualties. It was the most one-sided victory in recorded galactic history. The surviving elements of the Voidborn fleet, perhaps 300 ships out of the original 2,000, fled toward their home systems in complete disarray. The hive mind that had once contemplated consuming the entire galaxy now faced the terrifying prospect of its own extinction. Admiral Sullivan surveyed the battlefield with grim satisfaction. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Pursue the retreating enemy. No Voidborn vessel is to escape this system." Ambassador Veltar watched the aftermath of the battle from his observation ship, struggling to comprehend what he had witnessed. The humans had not just defeated the Voidborn fleet, they had annihilated it with casual efficiency. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries had been broken in a single afternoon by Deathworlders, who approached warfare like a science experiment. The human fleet pursued the fleeing Voidborn ships through 3 star systems, hunting down survivors with the methodical patience of apex predators. Admiral Sullivan had made her intentions clear: no enemy vessel would escape to rebuild and threaten innocent lives again. This was not conquest or territory expansion. This was extermination warfare carried out with the ruthless efficiency that had made humanity masters of their death world. Captain Ben Rodriguez commanded the Eon's Hellfire as it led the assault on the first Voidborn stronghold system. The enemy had established a massive bioconstruct around the system's largest moon, a living fortress that pulsed with organic weapons and defensive systems. Intelligence estimates suggested it housed over 1 million Voidborn entities and served as a primary breeding facility for their fleet. "Target analysis complete," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sam Parker. "The structure appears to be a single organism approximately 800 kilometers in diameter. It's heavily defended with biocannons and regenerative armor." Systems. Rodriguez studied the readings with professional interest. The Voidborn had built their fortress using the same adaptive principles that made their ships so dangerous against conventional enemies. It could heal damage, evolve countermeasures, and grow stronger through combat. Against any other species, it would have been impregnable. "Load the planet crackers," Rodriguez ordered. The planet cracker weapons had been developed during humanity's expansion into the asteroid belt, originally designed for mining operations that required splitting large rocks into manageable pieces. Military engineers had quickly realized their potential for more aggressive applications. Each weapon generated a focused beam of exotic matter that could destabilize the molecular bonds holding large objects together. "Weapon charged and ready for firing," Parker reported. Targeting the central core structure, the beam lanced out across space, invisible to normal sensors but devastating in its effect. The exotic matter penetrated deep into the heart of the bio-fortress before releasing its energy. The massive structure began collapsing in on itself as its molecular structure failed. Within minutes, the moon-sized fortress had been reduced to a spreading cloud of organic debris. Similar scenes played out across the Voidborn home cluster as human forces systematically dismantled every enemy installation. The aliens had built their civilization around the concept of biological adaptation and regeneration. They had never faced an enemy that simply destroyed everything completely. Leaving nothing to adapt or regenerate from, Admiral Sullivan watched the tactical displays from the bridge of the UNS Defiance as her fleet moved through the enemy's core. Systems. 13 star systems connected by artificial wormholes, each one housing billions of voidborn entities and the infrastructure that supported their expansion across the galaxy. It was the heart of an empire that had consumed dozens of civilizations. Status report on the systematic elimination, she requested from Fleet Commander Brooks. The Third Fleet has secured the outer systems, Brooks replied. 7 biostations have been destroyed with no survivors. The 7th Fleet is engaging the manufacturing complexes in the middle systems. The 11th Fleet is preparing for the final assault on the primary hive mind nodes. Dr. Lisa Martinez monitored the campaign from her mobile laboratory, recording data that would reshape galactic understanding of warfare and biology. The Voidborn are attempting to consolidate their remaining forces, she reported. All surviving bioships and defensive installations are converging on the central system where the primary hive mind is located. Captain Danny Walsh received new orders as his destroyer squadron approached the final battleground. The surviving Voidborn had gathered everything they had left into a single massive organism that defied conventional understanding. It was part space station, part living creature, and part artificial intelligence, a fusion of biology and technology that represented the absolute pinnacle of their species' development. Sensors are reading a single contact approximately 2,000 kilometers in diameter, reported his sensor operator Jim Hayes. It appears to be incorporating debris from destroyed bioships and stations into its structure. The thing is actually growing as we watch. Lieutenant Amy Foster checked her weapon systems and frowned. Captain, I'm not sure our standard arsenal will be effective against something that size. The target is larger than most moons. Walsh studied the tactical data with growing amazement. The Voidborn had created their ultimate adaptation, a living world ship that incorporated the consciousness of their entire species. It was designed to be impossible to kill through conventional means. A final gambit by a species facing extinction. Admiral Sullivan received the reports from the forward scouts and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance. Prepare to deploy Nova torpedoes. The Nova torpedoes were theoretical weapons that no sane species would actually build. They were designed to cause stars to undergo controlled supernova events, essentially turning entire solar systems into weapons. Humanity had built them because the universe was a dangerous place, and sometimes total annihilation was the only reliable solution to existential threats. Fleet Commander Brooks coordinated the deployment from the fleet's command ship. All vessels have withdrawn to safe distance. Nova torpedoes are armed and programmed for stellar destabilization. Estimated time to supernova event is 4 minutes after impact. The weapons streaked toward their target, not the massive Voidborn organism, at the star it orbited. The Voidborn entity, for all its size and adaptive capabilities, was still dependent on energy from the system's primary star. If that star ceased to exist, so would everything else in the system. The torpedoes penetrated the star's outer layers and released their exotic matter payloads deep within the stellar core. Nuclear fusion reactions that had burned steadily for billions of years suddenly became unstable. The star began consuming its own fuel at an exponentially increasing rate. The Voidborn superorganism detected the stellar instability and tried desperately to adapt. It began growing energy collection systems and radiation shielding, attempting to survive what it recognized as an artificial supernova. But some forces were beyond the power of biological adaptation to overcome. The star exploded with the fury of 1 trillion nuclear weapons detonating simultaneously. The flash could be seen from 3 star systems away as the Voidborn entity and everything else in the system was vaporized by stellar fire. Within seconds, an entire solar system had been sterilized of all life. Ambassador Veltar watched the distant supernova from the observation deck of his ship, struggling to process what the humans had done. They had not just defeated the Voidborn, they had erased them from existence so completely that nothing remained but expanding waves of stellar plasma. "It is finished," Admiral Sullivan announced to the assembled fleet. "The Voidborn Collective has been eliminated. All surviving vessels will return to Earth for debriefing and refit." The human fleet began its journey home, leaving behind empty star systems where a galactic menace had once thrived. The Voidborn, who had consumed billions of lives across dozens of civilizations, had been extinct for less than a week after encountering humanity. News of the victory spread quickly through galactic communication networks, but with it came a sobering realization. The galaxy now had protectors who fought with the absolute determination of a species that had evolved on the most dangerous world known to science. The humans had answered an alien call for help, but in doing so they had announced their presence as the galaxy's newest apex predator. In the depths of space, other threatening species that had been planning their own expansion campaigns quietly revised their strategies. The galaxy had changed forever, and everyone understood that there were now consequences for threatening innocent life. Consequences delivered by Deathworlders who viewed total warfare as just another survival skill.